I remember the day I met Jack as if it was yesterday. I was sitting in a small, cozy cafe, drinking the cheapest coffee they offered and trying to organize my thoughts and plans. Then he walked in, like something out of a movie, though there were no dramatic lights or music, just the sound of the bell over the door and the scent of old coffee mixed with his aftershave. "Is this seat taken?" he asked, pointing to the chair opposite me with a charming smile. "Looks free to me," I replied, trying to act cool and not show how surprised I was by his sudden arrival. We started chatting, and it felt like we were made for each other. He liked all the same things I did, from binge-watching the same cheesy TV shows to debating the best pizza topping, and yes, it's pineapple, fight me on it. Soon, we were dating seriously, not just hanging out now and then. It was like I'd known him all my life. Before long, we were even talking about marriage. That's when the trouble started. His parents, let me tell you, were tough to deal with. The first time I met them, it felt like walking into a lion's den wearing a steak. They had a way of smiling while sizing you up, deciding if you were good enough or not. "So you're the girl Jack can't stop talking about," his mom said, her tone anything but friendly. "Guilty as charged," I replied, trying not to let her get to me. They quickly made it clear they wanted us to sign a prenuptial agreement. Now, I'm not after anyone's money, but I didn't like how they approached it. "I'll sign your prenup," I told them, "but on one condition. If one of us cheats, the cheater has to pay up $200,000. Jack looked as if I'd hit him with a fish. "Babe, I'd never cheat on you," he said, looking serious. "Yeah, well, my ex said the same thing before I caught him cheating," I said. "So it was this deal or nothing." He agreed, and so did his parents, although they looked pretty sour about it. We thought that was the end of that issue, but we were wrong. One evening, we were snuggled up on our old creaky couch. We kept saying we'd replace it, but never did because it was our special spot. The TV was on, but we weren't really watching. We were too excited, planning a trip to Switzerland we knew we couldn't really afford, but were determined to make happen. "Think about it, Jack. The food, the wine, the art. We have to go," I said, my eyes lit up with excitement. Jack laughed and hugged me closer. "Linda, you had me at food, but let's be real. Our bank account is more suited for camping in the backyard than a romantic trip to Lausanne." I nudged him playfully. "So we'll save. We'll cut back on things we don't need, like your video games." He pretended to be shocked. "Not the video games. Take my shirts, my shoes, even my beloved coffee maker, but leave the games alone." We laughed together. That was typical for us, dreaming big but staying realistic about our simple life. And we were happy. Our joy wasn't just in big adventures. It was in the little things too, like how Jack would make breakfast on Saturdays. He couldn't really cook, but he had somehow mastered scrambled eggs and toast, which he'd serve with his terrible coffee. I loved those mornings. "Hey, I'm thinking scrambled eggs today. What do you think?" he'd ask, already heading to the kitchen. "Only if you promise not to burn the toast this time." I'd shout back, adding, "And I'm making the coffee." One day, while we were washing dishes together, a simple task that felt special because we did it together, Jack brought up a topic we had been avoiding. "Linda, we need to talk about, starting a family," he said, breaking the comfortable silence. I paused, holding a plate. "I know, it's just scary, isn't it? What if we can't?" Jack turned to me, drying his hands on a towel. "Then we'll handle it together, but we won't know until we try, right? How hard can it be?" I laughed, feeling a mix of nerves and love. Famous last words, babe. But that's how we were. No matter what came our way, we faced it together. Even when his mom started hinting about wanting grandchildren every chance she got, we managed. "Linda, darling, when are you going to give me some grandbabies? You're not getting any younger, she'd say. Her tone was sweet, but her words were sharp. I just bite my tongue, smile, and say, "We're working on it, aren't we, Jack?" And he'd jump in, "Yeah, Mom, Give it a rest, will you? These things take time. But as the year went on, the pressure increased. It wasn't just from his mom, but from within us too. We wanted a family, but it wasn't happening as easily as we hoped. Since Sophia found her new hobby of making my life difficult, our home felt like a battleground, her sharp words the main weapon. It all came to a head one Sunday lunch, a day meant to be relaxed and peaceful. Sophia, with her usual timing, dropped by uninvited just as we were about to sit down. The air tensed the moment she walked in, her eyes scanning the room as if she was about to conduct a military inspection. "Well, isn't this quaint?" she started, her voice dripping with sarcasm as she looked at the simple meal I prepared. "You really outed yourself, Linda. I can see you've been busy in the kitchen all morning." Her eyes met mine briefly, a smirk on her lips. Trying to keep the peace, I forced a smile. "It's nothing fancy, Sophia, just something simple and quick. Please have a seat." As we sat down, she began her usual tirade. "You know, Linda," Sophia said, her voice loaded with condescension, "I was talking to Mrs. Charlotte the other day, and she mentioned how her grandson was just born. It got me thinking, when are you and Jack going to give me some good news? You're not getting any younger." I felt my cheeks burn with a mix of embarrassment and anger. I glanced at Jack, hoping for some support, but he seemed suddenly very interested in his plate. "Mom, come on," Jack finally muttered, but it was half-hearted, and we all knew it. Sophia continued, relentless. "I don't mean to be harsh, but you're not a charity. You work hard for your money. Why waste it on Linda if she can't do her basic duties as a wife? Hiring a cleaning service and a cook would be much more efficient, don't you think?" That's when I couldn't hold back any longer. "Sophia, I am trying my best here. It's not like I don't want to have kids. And as for the house and my cooking, I didn't realize marriage was a service contract." Sophia scoffed. "Well, it's not a free ride either. You have responsibilities, Linda, which you're clearly not fulfilling." The room was thick with tension, and I could feel tears starting to form. But what hurt the most wasn't Sophia's words, it was Jack's silence. He finally spoke up, but it wasn't to defend me. "Yeah, Mom has a point. Maybe we should consider getting some help around here. It would make things easier for you too." His words felt like a betrayal. It was clear I was on my own. Over the next few days, Sophia's visits became more frequent, and with each visit, her criticism got sharper. She'd inspect the house, pointing out every speck of dust or a pillow out of place. "You call this clean?" she'd scoff. "My eyes must be deceiving me because this looks like a pigsty." Then came the comments about my appearance. "Is that what you're wearing? You know, a wife should dress to please her husband. It's no wonder Jack is always so tired. He has to come home to this." I tried to fight back. "Sophia, I don't dress for Jack. I dress for myself. And he's tired because he works hard, not because of what I wear." But it was like talking to a brick wall. Sophia had made up her mind about me, and nothing I said or did would change it. Jack's lack of support was the biggest blow. Each night after his mom left, we'd argue. "Why won't you stand up for me, Jack? She's walking all over us, and you're just letting her." "Linda, she's old and set in her ways. What do you want me to do, kick my own mom out?" "No, but I want you to be my husband, to stand by me, not her." It was clear this was about more than just Sophia's disapproval. It was about us, our marriage, and whether we were strong enough to stand together or let Sophia's criticisms tear us apart as the days turned into weeks. I realized this wasn't just a temporary issue, it was a full-on attack, and if we didn't act soon, there might not be anything left to save. Things between me and Jack had been cold since Sophia intensified her criticisms. But it wasn't just our home life that was under pressure. Jack himself had started acting strange, and it wasn't just because he was stressed at work. It was something more, something that made my stomach churn. It began with phone calls. Jack used to be open about his phone. We didn't keep secrets from each other. But then he started leaving the room whenever he got a call, and it was always the same caller ID, Paul Work. One evening, I tried to sound casual and asked, "Who's Paul Work?" Jack flinched, a clear sign he was nervous. "Oh, just a new guy at the office, asks a lot of questions," he said. But there was more. Jack, who was never into fashion, suddenly started caring about how he looked. The graphic tees and old jeans were gone, replaced by crisp shirts, slacks, and even cologne. "Since when did you start caring about smelling like a department store?" I joked one morning as I watched him comb his hair in a new style. He just smirked too quickly, just felt like changing things up. No harm in that, right? And then there were the late nights at work, which became more frequent. "Another long one, babe?" I texted, trying not to sound needy. "Sorry, this project is killing me." "Won't be late, I promise," he texted back. But it would be well past midnight before I'd hear his keys in the door. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. It followed me like a shadow. That's when I decided to hire a private detective. It felt like something from a cheesy TV show, but I had to know for sure. The evidence came in a plain brown envelope, as heartbreaking as it was conclusive. Photos of Jack with another woman, their closeness unmistakable, caught in moments that shattered our years together. But it was the recording that hurt the most. Their conversations, filled with affection and plans, made it clear they were in love, or at least he was with her. I sat there with the evidence laid out in front of me, feeling a cold realization. This was the proof I might need if we ended up in a tough divorce. The photos captured moments stolen from our life together, and the recorded words betrayed every "I love you" he had ever whispered in my ear. But I kept it all to myself, a painful burden I chose to bear alone. I wasn't ready to confront him, not yet. I needed a plan, a way to handle the collapse of our marriage while keeping my dignity. The following days passed in a blur. Jack kept up his act, and I played the role of the perfect wife, smiling on the outside while breaking inside. Our conversations became a careful dance around the truth, each word measured, every laugh forced. "Everything okay, Em? You've been quiet," Jack would ask, his concern sounding real. "Yeah, just tired, you know. Work's been crazy," I'd reply, the lie bitter in my mouth. It was just another ordinary day, or so I thought, until I overheard a conversation that changed everything. I was passing by Jack's office, the door slightly open, when I heard their voices. It was Jack and his mother, Sophia, and they weren't just making small talk. Their tone was serious, full of intent. "I'm telling you, Mom, I can't do this anymore. It's not just about the kids. I've lost all feelings for Linda. It feels like we're roommates, not husband and wife," Jack said, his voice strained and tired. Sophia's response was sharp. "Of course you feel that way. She hasn't given you a child. And what else has she really brought to this marriage? But let's not rush things. My 65th birthday is coming up, and we wouldn't want to miss out on a generous gift from her, would we?" The cynicism in her voice was like a knife twisting in my gut. They were using me, planning to keep me around just long enough to benefit from a generous birthday gift before casting me aside. "Exactly, dear. Just bide your time a little longer," Sophia confirmed, her voice dripping with malice. I stood there, frozen, feeling both shocked and angry. They were planning to push me out of the family as easily as making a grocery list. The pain was deep, but it ignited a fierce desire for revenge within me. They thought they could use me and toss me aside when convenient. I was determined to show them that I wasn't just a pawn in their twisted game. A few days later, during a family dinner that felt more like an act than a meal, Sophia brought up her upcoming birthday with a smirk I had grown to hate. She leaned in and asked, "So Linda, dear, what are you planning for my birthday? Something special, I hope." I looked at her calmly and said, "Actually, Sophia, I was thinking of hosting a dinner at the city's most luxurious restaurant, a night you won't forget." Her eyes lit up with greed, and she shared a quick, satisfied glance with Jack. They thought they had cornered me, but they didn't know I was already 2 steps ahead. Oh, Linda, that sounds delightful. Just close family, Keep it intimate, Sophia said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. Of course, Sophia, it'll be our pleasure, I replied, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. The weeks leading up to Sophia's 65th birthday felt like a slow march to a big showdown. Every smirk from her and every indifferent shrug from Jack strengthened my determination. My plan was simple yet bold: host a lavish dinner as a supposed loving gesture, then drop a huge surprise. Like all good plans, the details were crucial. The night before the party, tension filled our home. Jack, unaware of the brewing storm, lounged casually on the couch, scrolling through his phone. "Everything set for tomorrow?" he asked, not looking up. "You could say that," I replied, my voice hiding the chaos inside. The day arrived, and as guests filled the lavish dining room we had reserved for Sophia's celebration, the air was thick with anticipation. My heart raced, not from nerves, but from the thrill of what was about to happen. Sophia, reveling in the attention, basked in the luxury of her surroundings. "Oh, Linda, you've outdone yourself. This place is exquisite," she exclaimed loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. As we all settled in, the meal went on with the kind of strange cheer typical of such family events. Laughs were shared, stories exchanged. Then, as the dessert plates were cleared, the waiter approached with the final act of the evening, the bill. He leaned in discreetly and informed us the dinner cost was $66,000. I handed over my credit card, unnoticed by most. Then Jack, with a forced smirk, decided to announce his decision. "Linda, I think it's time everyone knew. I'm tired of this, of us. I want a divorce." His words hung in the air like a toxic cloud, silencing the room. Before I could fully grasp what he said, Sophia, sharp and unforgiving, chimed in. "Well then, since that's out in the open, I think it's best you leave, Linda. We're celebrating family tonight, and well, you're no longer part of it." The room fell silent, every eye on me, waiting to see my reaction. But I didn't crumble. With a calm I didn't feel, I stood up, nodded, and walked out without a word. The cool night air felt like a slap as I walked home, the finality of everything hitting me in waves. By the time I reached his apartment, I had a plan. I packed my essentials, my numbness turning into cold resolve. This was it, the end of one life and the start of another. As I zipped up my last suitcase, my phone began to buzz. It was relentless, and I initially ignored it. But curiosity won, and Sophia's voice shrieked from the other end. "Linda, the payment didn't go through. You need to fix this now." The irony was sweet. In my preparations, I had blocked the shared account, knowing it would be the first thing Jack would try to use against me. "Oh, Sophia, that's unfortunate. But since I'm no longer part of the family, as you put it, I'm afraid you'll have to sort this out yourself." Her outrage was palpable even through the phone, but it sounded like music to my ears. The chaos that unfolded was a fitting end to the farce my marriage had become. I heard through the grapevine about the restaurant staff demanding payment, Sophia's escalating tantrums, and eventually the police arriving to calm the situation she caused. In the end, it was Jack and his relatives who had to scrape together the money to settle the bill, a poetic justice for the betrayal and humiliation they had put me through. The morning after the dinner felt like waking up after a storm. I had my plan, my resolve, and a set of divorce papers in my hand as I returned to what used to be our shared home for the last time. As soon as I walked through the door, the air was thick with tension, like it could be cut with a knife. Jack and Sophia were there, and they seemed like they had been arguing. Seeing me seemed to unite them in anger. "You've got some nerve showing up here after last night," Jack said, his face a mix of anger and disbelief. Sophia, quick to add her own harsh words, called out, "Ungrateful wretch. You've embarrassed us in front of the whole city." Do you know how humiliating it was to have the police calm me down? People were laughing, filming. I met their fury with a calm I didn't feel. "Embarrassed? You think that's your biggest problem right now?" I tossed the divorce papers on the table, placing the photos of Jack's infidelity on top. You should be more worried about this. Jack's face went pale as he picked up the photos, with his mother looking over his shoulder. Their anger turned to shock, and then to panic as they realized what I had. And let's not forget the prenup, shall we? I continued, my voice steady. You cheat, you pay $200,000, to be exact. Sophia's face twisted into a snarl. You wouldn't dare. You can't do this to us. Oh, but I can, and I will, I replied, my tone cold and final. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, Jack changed his approach. Please, let's talk about this. We can fix it. I couldn't help but laugh, bitter and hard. Fix it? You think you can just undo everything with a few words? No, Jack, it's done. Sophia, ever the manipulator, tried to soften her approach, her voice full of fake concern. Linda, darling, think about what you're doing. This will ruin us. That ship has sailed, Sophia. You should have thought about that before. Their begging turned to pleading, their words a desperate scramble to salvage what they could, but my mind was made up. I was done being the victim, done with their lies and manipulations. In the end, Jack had no choice but to borrow the money from his parents to pay me. As I left that house for the last time, check in hand, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. After everything that had happened, I was finally free. I used the money from Jack to make a down payment on a small but cozy place of my own. It's amazing how much peace you can find in a home that's all yours, where every corner feels like a safe haven from the chaos of the past. Life is quieter now, and I prefer it that way. I've got a job that keeps me busy, friendly neighbors who nod and smile, and a little garden that's all mine to take care of. But every now and then, I hear some gossip about Jack and Sophia. Just the other day, I was getting coffee from the local spot where people gather, and I bumped into someone from the old neighborhood. After some small talk, they leaned in, lowered their voice, and said, "Hey, have you heard the latest drama with your ex and his mom?" Their eyes were shining with excitement. I raised an eyebrow, curious yet detached. Can't say that I have, do tell. They seemed to enjoy sharing the news. It seems Sophia isn't too happy with Jack's new girlfriend. Word is, they're fighting like cats and dogs. Makes your situation look like a walk in the park. We moved on from the topic, but as I walked away with my coffee, I felt a deep sense of relief. There was a time when news like this would have upset me, but now it's just another piece of someone else's story. These days, my biggest concerns are whether my tomatoes will ripen before the squirrels get to them, or if I'll ever manage yoga without looking like a newborn deer on ice. Life's simpler, quieter, and so much sweeter on this side of chaos. More champagne, Mom? Larry asked, refilling my glass before I could even answer. I gave a hesitant smile, nervously glancing at my son and his fiancée. We were having a small family dinner to celebrate their engagement, but something didn't feel right in my stomach. To your happiness, Laura, I said, raising my glass. Laura clinked her glass against mine with a purr. I took a big sip. There's something we want to talk about tonight, Larry said, sharing a knowing look with Laura. We're planning a big engagement party next month. Only the best for us. I laughed a bit nervously. That sounds wonderful for you both. But aren't those parties expensive? Oh, we're not paying for it, Laura said casually, waving her hand. That's going to be your gift to us. I almost choked on my drink. I'm sorry? As Larry's mother, it's your duty to pay, Laura continued. We expect you to chip in at least $30,000. Consider it an investment in your son's future. They couldn't be serious. $30,000 for a party. I asked, shocked. Do you realize how unreasonable that is? Don't be ridiculous, Mom, Larry cut in. You make good money, and you have all that inheritance from Dad. You've been saving it all. The mention of my husband, who had recently died from cancer, felt like a fresh wound. I pulled back, hurt by their harsh words. That money is my savings for retirement and to cover my expenses. You didn't even discuss this with me first. Laura rolled her eyes dramatically. Still on about being consulted? Get it over it already. You're the mother of the groom. This is what's expected. Just pay up and be happy we're even letting you help. You should feel honored we're inviting you, Larry sneered. Just write the check so we can start planning. I sat there stunned, unable to believe their arrogance and lack of care. I tried once more to reason with my son. Honey, be reasonable. You can have a nice party without it costing so much. Maybe we can cut back a little? Larry slammed his fist on the table, making the glasses shake. I knew you'd be stingy, he yelled. Some mother you are, not even supporting your only son. Tears filled my eyes as I faced their scornful looks. I had always pampered Larry, but I never thought he could be so cruel and disrespectful. I stood up quickly, feeling disgusted by the two unpleasant people in my home. I think you should leave now, I said in a low voice. Laura jumped up and grabbed my shoulders with her sharp red nails. Don't even think about shirking your responsibilities, she hissed, her breath heavy with perfume assaulting my nose. Pay up, or you can forget about having a relationship with Larry and seeing any future grandchildren. I pushed her off forcefully. Get out, I yelled. Leave my house this instant. They left without another word, but I caught them smirking triumphantly at each other. My heart sank as I realized the engagement celebration I had hoped for would only bring greed, manipulation, and pain. The next evening, tired from a long day at work, but determined to resolve the conflict, I prepared a simple pasta dinner, hoping for a frank discussion with Larry. I heard the front door slam and braced myself as loud footsteps approached. Something smells good, Larry said as he walked into the kitchen and headed straight for the wine cabinet. My hopes lifted briefly, then faded as Laura followed him in, reeking of strong perfume. So much for a private chat. To what do I owe the pleasure? I asked, trying to sound calm as I drained the pasta. You're going to love what we have planned, Laura said cheerfully, ignoring my tone as she dug through her flashy handbag. We met with the wedding planner today, and everything is set. All we need is one little thing from you. She pulled out a folder stuffed with brochures and invoices. Just sign here for the $70,000 wedding package. I froze, a chill running down my spine. $70,000, I exclaimed. For a one-day event? That's absurd. It's our special day, Larry complained. Don't I deserve the best? I tried to appeal to his better nature. Son, be reasonable. Let's have a small, meaningful ceremony instead of this extravagance. Laura slammed the folder down. You clueless fool. Who said you have a say in this? She screamed. You'll pay every penny to give your only son the wedding of his dreams. Anger surged within me, but before I could respond, we all turned in surprise to see my daughter Linda standing in the doorway, looking determined. I was so caught up in the argument that I didn't even notice her come in. Stay out of this, Laura snapped at my daughter, Linda, who is a bold, tattooed graphic novelist. This doesn't concern you. The hell it doesn't, Linda shot back. You don't talk to my mother like that. She walked over and stood next to me protectively. Normally, I might have been a bit upset by her stepping in. I've always tried to be the strong, independent head of our family. But right then, I was grateful for her support. Larry threw his hands up dramatically. I ask for one simple wedding, and my whole family turns against me. He pointed at Linda. This is all your fault. You're filling Mom's head with crazy ideas. She owes me this money and her loyalty. Linda crossed her arms. Mom owes you nothing but basic respect, which you clearly can't give back, she said. She raised you all by herself after Dad died, working hard to give you every chance in life. And this is how you thank her? By using her? Larry had no comeback, just mumbled under his breath. Linda turned to me, holding my hand firmly. Stay strong, Mom. Set your limits and demand the respect you deserve. I'm here for you. Feeling a surge of relief, my doubts washed away by my daughter's firm support, I stood up taller. You both have two choices. I said loudly to Larry and Laura. Treat me and my daughter with basic decency, or leave our lives for good. Laura opened her mouth, probably ready to say something harsh, but then she saw Linda's stern look and thought better of it. She grabbed Larry by the ear and dragged him out. I squeezed Linda's hand, tears of gratitude in my eyes. How did I get so lucky to have a daughter like you? She gave a wry smile, just being a chip off the old block. Now, let's eat that pasta and plan our next move. These jerks don't know who they're dealing with. The next week was tough, filled with uncertainty. My phone buzzed nonstop with demanding texts and voicemails from Larry, angry when I didn't call back right away. I started ignoring his calls, not having the energy to deal with his rants. When Saturday afternoon arrived, I decided to treat myself to a manicure to cheer myself up. As I relaxed and the technician worked on my nails, my phone buzzed again. Normally, I would ignore it, but this time, I saw it was Larry's number and curiosity got the better of me. "Hi, honey," I answered cautiously. "It's your witch of a mother," came Laura's harsh voice instead, making my blood start to boil. I was about to hang up when I heard Larry in the background. "Is the old bag actually taking your call? She's been dodging mine all week." Then Larry's voice came through clearly. "Mom, what the heck? I've been calling nonstop. Have you thought more about funding the wedding? The coordinator is on my case." I was ready to say no firmly, but Laura cut me off. "Oh, forget it already. She's clearly a lost cause." I heard a slap, like she swatted his arm. "Your mother is a selfish old prune. Once we're married, we'll change all the account passwords so she can't touch our money." My eyes widened. Our money? More noise followed. Then Laura sneered. "Why are we even inviting her to the wedding? She'll just show up in some cheap outfit from a discount store." Their loud laughter made my blood boil, but Larry's next words were worse. "Right, and she'll complain about helping us, as if that tiny insurance payout compares to what I make in a month." I was furious. That tiny payout was nearly $500,000 I had saved for retirement, not wasted like my irresponsible son. Laura laughed loudly. "Oh, please, we both know it was your dad's money that got you that job. Your mom couldn't handle money without a man's help." "Absolutely," Larry laughed. "And we're using that inheritance money way better, like our first-class trips to Australia." Their laughter enraged me. I pressed the red button on my phone so hard I almost cracked the screen. Hearing their cruel words confirmed my suspicions and shook me deeply. My hands shook with anger and outrage. I quickly waved off the concerned looks from the nail technician, threw some cash on the counter, and rushed out the door. I drove home as fast as I could, filled with the need to talk to someone about what happened. Thankfully, Linda was already there, her motorcycle parked unevenly on the driveway. I burst through the front door, and Linda jumped up from the couch, surprised by my upset look. I poured out the whole story, feeling enraged. Linda's green eyes flashed with anger. "Those deceivers," she shouted. "I knew it. They never cared about family or celebration. They just see you as a money source." "I feel so betrayed and used," I said, feeling bitter and trying not to cry. "My own son, how could he?" Linda took me by the shoulders, looking me in the eye. "Mom, listen. We need to get proof and expose these lowlifes for who they are." She slapped her hand with her fist, showing she meant business. "Contact the wedding planner. Get all the documents showing plans made without your oak. I'll look into Laura's background too. I bet her family is rich despite her act." I felt hope and courage rise in me again. Linda was right. It was time to take control and fight back. I hugged her tightly, more thankful than ever for her honesty and strength. "Let's expose them," I said. Over the next 4 weeks, Linda and I collected a lot of evidence showing Larry and Laura's dishonesty. Linda found out that Laura came from a very wealthy family. Her dad owns a big real estate investment company and could easily pay for their extravagant wedding. Meanwhile, I got financial records from the wedding planner showing the huge costs Larry and Laura wanted me to cover $95,000 and counting. We have everything we need to confront these cheaters, Linda announced, spreading the papers on the dining table. Let's invite them over to talk about wedding plans, and then reveal what we know, she suggested, her eyes shining with determination. I called them, pretending I was ready to discuss paying for the wedding. They took the bait and agreed to come right away. They arrived on time, the doorbell ringing loudly. Larry and Laura walked in, as usual, full of arrogance and the smell of expensive perfume. "Where's my check?" Larry demanded immediately, never one for subtlety. Laura elbowed him, then put on a fake sweet smile. "Yes, do tell us the good news," she said cheerily. "We have so many decisions to finalize for our big day." I gestured for them to sit down. Linda quietly handed me a thick manila envelope full of damning evidence. My heart raced, but I felt determined. I clasped my hands tightly on the table. "Before we discuss any more plans, I have some concerns," I said. I pulled the papers from the envelope and spread them out in front of me. According to the wedding planner, the current expenses total $95,000. "Can you explain this?" I asked. Laura scoffed loudly. "It's the wedding of the century. What do you expect?" "I expect honest communication about money and shared responsibility," I replied calmly. "For example, why don't Laura's very wealthy parents contribute their fair share?" I showed them a copy of her dad's business profile, showing he was worth tens of millions. They could easily afford it. Laura turned pale, and Larry got angry. "Leave Laura's family out of this. It's my wedding, my financial support," he said, pointing at me. "And you're my mother, so just write the check." Expecting their denial, I calmly slid over a pile of invoices and contracts. "Actually, these documents show otherwise. They have my forged signature authorizing $230,000 in non-refundable payments so far. Care to explain that?" Laura gasped. "Are you accusing us of fraud?" From beside me, Linda slammed her fist down. "Damn right she is," she shouted, surprising them into silence. She then spread out the rest of the contents from the envelope: bank statements, screenshots, phone records. Clear evidence of their lies and manipulation lay scattered dramatically across the table. "It's all here, clear as day," Linda said with disgust. "You've been exploiting my mother's love and trust, never caring about family, just what you can get from her." "You were spying on us," Larry said in outrage. "Collecting evidence against your fraud," I corrected calmly. "And now you'll cancel this sham wedding immediately." Laura jumped up furious. "How dare you?" she yelled. "I will marry Larry with or without your money." She turned to my son, expecting support. But Larry just sat there, pale and quiet, overwhelmed by the revelations. Finally, Laura rolled her eyes. "Your spineless mama's boy," she muttered, grabbed her flashy handbag and stormed out. At the doorway, she turned to give one last angry look. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "We won't forget." Then she left in a huff, the smell of her perfume lingering in the air. I looked straight at my shaken son. "Nor will we," I said quietly. "Now leave." He got up quickly, but before he left, he mumbled a soft yet clear threat: "I'll make you pay for this." The day I had dreaded finally arrived: Larry and Laura's lavish wedding. Despite our previous confrontation, they went ahead with their extravagant plans, using even more of the retirement money I had put in Larry's accounts. So there I sat, a reluctant participant in their over-the-top wedding. All around me, guests who had drunk too much wandered under extravagant floral decorations that cost more than my first car. The highlight was an 8-tiered cake decorated with handcrafted sugar flowers. Larry and Laura's smug faces were displayed above everything in a huge golden frame. Next to me, Linda slouched in her ripped jeans and combat boots, her pixie-cut green hair standing out against the pastel bridesmaid dresses. We watched the lavish event unfold, barely hiding our disgust. Then the music changed to a grand wedding march, and the crowd quieted as Larry took his place under a brightly decorated arch. My heart tightened. He looked so much like his father, handsome in his tuxedo, radiating charm. There was no sign of the greedy boy I had confronted weeks ago. As Laura walked down the aisle in a fancy dress that I suspected was charged to my credit card, old memories and sadness surged within me. Over 28 years ago, I had walked that same path, full of naive dreams of love and family that quickly turned sour. My faith in love had faded with my husband's death, and now the son we had raised showed me the same cold disregard. As the ceremony went on, anger built inside me. I would not stay silent or support this loveless marriage any longer. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping loudly across the polished floor. Everyone looked at me. Linda took my hand, giving me strength. Clearing my throat, I met Larry's shocked look. "I apologize, but I cannot stay silent about this farce," I declared. The guests murmured in shock. Larry's face turned red, and he looked embarrassed under my stern gaze. Before he could say anything, Laura pushed past him, her eyes full of anger. "How dare you ruin my perfect day?" she shouted, coming toward me with her hands raised aggressively. I stepped back, recoiling from Laura's hostile energy. Linda immediately stepped in front of the bride. "Back off," she said firmly, standing protectively in front of me. A surprised murmur spread through the room. No one else moved to help. Larry kept his head down, not looking at me, and didn't try to stop Laura. My heart broke. All illusions were gone. I no longer had a son. The greedy, cowardly stranger in front of me would never again receive my support or resources. I moved past Linda to speak to everyone. "Let all bear witness to this fake, pretentious wedding," I said loudly. I refused to support these deceivers any longer, and I cut all ties. This farce ends now. I turned and walked briskly to the exit, my skirt swirling dramatically. As I passed my shocked son, I paused long enough to echo his earlier threat, "You'll regret this." Then I walked away confidently, Linda right beside me, our footsteps echoing a firm departure from that toxic place. We stepped into the dim sunlight outside, the doors closing behind us, cutting off Laura's angry shouts. I took a deep, freeing breath. Relief washed over me as Linda and I got into her car. "Thank you for being there with me," I told her, patting her tattooed hand. She smiled slightly. "Are you kidding? I've wanted to stand up to Laura for years." As we drove away from the extravagant deceit, tears came to my eyes, but this time they were tears of relief, not sadness or regret. Looking at my brave, loyal daughter smiling back at me, I knew I would never be alone again. In the months after that disastrous wedding, I changed my phone number, moved to a new place, and shifted my remaining assets, cutting off all contact with Larry and his toxic bride. I heard through rumors that they had their honeymoon in Australia, likely using what was left of my retirement savings. Let them indulge, I thought bitterly. Reality will catch up soon. Sure enough, just a year later, Larry showed up at my doorstep. I came home to find him sitting there, unshaven and smelling of stale cigarettes. I was so surprised that I froze, my grocery bag slipping from my hands. Larry's eyes showed a flash of embarrassment. He tried to help me pick up my things, then said quietly, "Hey Ma, can we talk?" I walked past him without a word to unlock my front door, motioning for him to come inside. He lingered awkwardly as I slowly put away the groceries, steeling myself before finally speaking. "What do you want?" I asked bluntly. Larry cleared his throat. "I need your help, just temporarily," he quickly added, as if that made his request any less bold. "I'm between jobs right now, and Laura is upset because I can't cover her expenses." "Absolutely not," I said sharply, cutting off his rambling. I crossed my arms, feeling both anger and satisfaction. "You made this mess, now deal with it." Larry looked shocked, not used to such a direct denial. "Come on, Ma, I'm really struggling here. Can't you lend me a few thousand? I'll pay you back, I swear." I stood firm, unmoving. You never planned to pay me back the first time you emptied my accounts. I reminded him coldly. Why should I believe you now? He blushed. I was wrong before, okay, but I'm still your son. With a swift motion of my hand, I cut him off. You lost that privilege long ago. I have no son, I declared, pointing at him. Now you face the consequences. Get out. He tried to speak, but no words came out against my firm disgust. With drooping shoulders, Larry left my house and my life once again. It was about time he experienced the reality of his actions. I locked the door quickly, feeling a rush of vindication before any pity or regret could set in. There was no forgiving someone who repeatedly betrayed me. Larry's pitiful state was proof that karma was catching up with him. I later heard that his fancy tech startup had failed within a year, and my business contacts had shunned him. No investor wanted anything to do with his dubious schemes. Meanwhile, Laura returned to her wealthy father after too many arguments over unpaid bills. The last I heard, she was planning to divorce Larry and was involved with a wealthy older man in San Remo. That night, Linda and I toasted to their misfortunes over cocktails, laughing about the rumors that Larry was now working in fast food under a fake name. Karma's a harsh one, Linda said, raising her glass. Here's to it continuing to bite those who deserve it. I happily clanked my glass against Linda's. No truer words have been spoken, I agreed. Over the next year and a half, Linda's career took off. More and more high-profile clients wanted her unique tattoo designs and graphic novels. She even got a book deal for her bold memoir about our family struggles, which was creating a buzz before it even hit the shelves. Behind the scenes, Linda trusted me with her growing finances. At her request, I used my years of experience to secure trademarks, negotiate publishing rights, and maximize her profits. I was so proud to see her passions thrive with my help. Linda started appearing in trendy fashion magazines and was featured in popular graphic anthologies. She bought a stylish loft downtown, which served as her business hub and showcased the impressive views she had earned with her talent. To celebrate Linda's success, I planned a small party at her chic new place. It would mark her as a true artistic force and independent businesswoman. Linda welcomed the guests with a bit of nervousness, so I reassured her as I adjusted her blazer. Just be yourself. Everyone here already loves you. Soon, the loft was filled with Linda's creative friends, including daring writers, top publishers, edgy photographers, and even some famous faces from her celebrity clients, all there to celebrate their favorite artist. My heart swelled with pride hearing such influential people praise my daughter. This was the kind of launch party Larry could only dream of. 3 years ago, our family name was damaged by selfish actions, but now, thanks to Linda's hard work, we had gained respect and admiration at the highest levels of the art world. Late in the evening, I joined Linda on the balcony, looking out over the city lights. She squeezed my hand. None of this would have been possible without you, Mom. You believed in me when no one else did, and fought for me. I'll always owe you. I hugged her, holding my champagne flute. Nonsense, my brave girl. Your success is all because of your talent and vision. I just handled the business side so you could focus on creating. Linda smiled. Well, I definitely got your business sense and Dad's creative flair, she joked, clinking her glass with mine. Here's to us, beating the odds and staying strong together. I laughed happily, feeling a deep joy as a mother. My daughter and I had survived tough times of greed and betrayal, and now we were thriving on our own success. As the party went on, I quietly raised my glass to the sky, thinking of her late father. We had indeed created a wonderful legacy, one built on integrity, courage, and hard work, not entitlement or manipulation. This legacy stood as a shining example to others, making the likes of Larry envious for years to come. Over the next 3 years, Linda's career continued to rise brilliantly. Meanwhile, I heard through the grapevine that Larry was struggling with obscurity and growing debt. His extravagant lifestyle hung on until his credit ran out and everything fell apart. Occasionally, I'd hear about Larry in the gossip columns, from Laura's very public affair to him getting fired from a car dealership for missing payments. I took these stories with quiet satisfaction, confident that our paths would never cross again. I had retired from my corporate role to focus on my passions, pursuing artistic hobbies, helping disadvantaged youth, and planning trips around the world. I also decided to move to a more manageable home and found the perfect place in a scenic coastal senior community. Surrounded by mature trees and vibrant gardens, I enjoyed peaceful walks with close friends, finding a new sense of tranquility. Meanwhile, Linda found her match in Riley, a brilliant software developer who loved her spirited nature. I saw true partnership potential in him right away, and my feelings were confirmed when they moved in together. Soon after, Linda excitedly showed me the unique ring Riley had designed, announcing their engagement. "My darling girl," I said, my eyes tearing up with joy, "I'm thrilled you found someone who deserves your big heart." Linda described her dream of a small garden wedding, much like my own vision from decades ago. No extravagant displays, just a deep, lifelong commitment surrounded by loved ones. I held her hand, emotionally moved by how beautifully she was realizing the dreams her father and I once had. Later, as we planned the wedding over tea and biscuits, Linda hesitated, then mentioned a difficult topic. "Mom, about inviting Larry." I quickly waved off the idea. "Let's not ruin your special day by bringing him into it," I said firmly. Linda looked conflicted. "I just can't help but feel sorry for him, you know. He's clearly a mess, but he's still family even if he doesn't deserve it." "I wonder if including him would be the right thing," Linda said, trailing off, unsure. Seeing my daughter's compassion, even for someone who hadn't shown her the same, I patted her hand reassuringly. "You shouldn't have to compromise your kindness. If it eases your mind to show Larry some small mercy, I can handle his presence just this once." Linda exhaled in relief and squeezed my hand, thankful. "You're the best, Mom. I knew you'd understand." Our sentimental moment was suddenly interrupted by my ringing cell phone. I was surprised to see Larry's name flash across the screen. It had been months since his last call, a desperate plea for money. With a grim face, I silenced the call. "Speak of the devil," I remarked. Linda shook her head. "He never stops trying to come back in. But don't worry, Mom. After the wedding, you'll never have to deal with his mess again." I smiled at Linda's protective words. She was right. It was time to stop listening to Larry's self-pitying attempts. I now had everything I needed right here, in a peaceful life surrounded by people who nurtured my spirit. No remnants from a toxic past could change that. I patted Linda's hand firmly. "Onwards and upwards, my dear. Now, tell me more about those lovely flower arrangements you've been thinking about."
I'm Dr. Lily Krug, though most people just call me Lily these days. After years of saving lives, I now mostly deal with paperwork at a local hospital and occasionally help out new doctors. But today isn't about any of that. Today, I'm getting ready to meet Amy, my son Scott's fiancée. My usual home is under renovation, so I'm staying in this small, simple rental. It's not much, but it's comfortable enough for the time being. To make the meeting special, I decided to bake my famous apple pie. Nothing says welcome like a homemade pie, right? Just as I was pulling it out of the oven, the doorbell rang. I wiped my hands on my apron and went to answer the door. There was Scott, looking as handsome as ever, and beside him stood Amy. She was just as beautiful as Scott had described, with a certain sharpness in her expression that made me take notice. "Mom, this is Amy," Scott said proudly, his voice full of happiness. "Nice to meet you, Lily," Amy said, offering her hand, though it felt a bit stiff when I shook it. "Come in, I hope you're hungry." "The pie just came out of the oven," I said with a smile, stepping aside to let them enter. Amy walked in and immediately started looking around the living room and kitchen. I noticed the little frown on her face as she took in the third-hand furniture, the old kitchen cabinets, and the plain walls that could definitely use a fresh coat of paint. "It's cozy," she said at last, with a polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "So, Lily, Scott tells me you work at the hospital. What do you do there?" she asked. "Oh, just some administrative work now," I answered, not wanting to boast about my long career. Scott glanced at me in surprise. "Mom, why don't you tell her about," he started, but I quickly cut him off with a wink as I began slicing the pie. "Never mind that. Let's have some pie. You'll love it, Amy. It's my special recipe," I said, steering the conversation away from my job. As we sat down to eat, Amy seemed more focused on asking questions than enjoying the pie. "So, how did you manage to send Scott to private schools? That must have been tough on just a hospital admin salary," she asked, her tone a bit too forward for my liking. The question took me by surprise. It felt a little too personal, and it annoyed me. I kept my voice steady. "Well, I had some help from my parents. They left me a small inheritance," I replied, hoping to keep things polite. I could tell she was judging me, trying to figure out how someone with a simple job could give their son such a fancy upbringing. Her questions felt more like an interrogation, each one coming with a sharpness, even though she tried to hide it under a polite tone. Scott, bless him, didn't seem to notice the tension. "Amy's been great with all the tech support at her job. You should see her in action, Mom," Scott said proudly. "That's impressive," I said, turning to Amy with genuine interest. "Technology really is the future, isn't it?" "It is, and it's so rewarding to be at the cutting edge, being part of something that really makes a difference," Amy replied. There was a mix of pride in her voice, along with something else I couldn't quite figure out. We kept chatting while eating the pie, moving from Scott's job to their wedding plans. I did my best to make Amy feel welcome, despite the awkward start. When it was time for them to leave, Scott hugged me tight, but Amy's goodbye felt cold, her smile practiced, but not reaching her eyes. As I washed the dishes, I made a mental note to stay alert. Scott was my world, and I wasn't going to let anyone mess with his happiness. After that first awkward meeting, I hoped things would get better with Amy, but as the wedding planning moved forward, so did the tension between us. Amy had a way of keeping me out of the planning, using polite but cold responses that made me feel like an outsider in my own son's future. One afternoon, Scott and Amy came over to talk about the wedding. I had made some coffee and put out a few snacks, hoping to create a warm, welcoming atmosphere. "Mom, we were thinking of having the wedding by the lake. What do you think?" Scott asked, spreading out photos of the venue on the coffee table. Before I could answer, Amy quickly added, "Oh, Lily, it's a bit far from the city. I'm not sure if all our guests would like the drive. We're thinking of a downtown spot, right, Brian?" Her tone was casual, but her words cut me off before I could share my opinion. I kept my voice steady. "The lake sounds beautiful, Scott. It would make for some lovely photos, and a little drive wouldn't hurt anyone." Amy laughed, a high-pitched sound that grated on my nerves. "Oh, but you know how bad traffic can be. We wouldn't want our guests stuck on the road all day." I held back a sharper reply and forced a smile instead. "Well, downtown is nice too, lots of great places there." Scott glanced between us, sensing the tension, but didn't say anything. He had always hated conflict, especially when it came to the people he cared about. "Right, well, Amy's been looking into some great downtown venues, haven't you, babe?" he said, giving her a supportive smile. "Absolutely," Amy replied, flipping her hair over her shoulder. "And Lily, we're also thinking of a modern theme for the wedding. Very sleek, very elegant. I'm guessing you'd prefer something more traditional?" Her eyes glanced at my old coffee mugs and worn tablecloth, her words dripping with subtle judgment. I clenched my jaw, feeling the sting. "I like modern just fine," I said, keeping my tone steady. "The most important thing is that you two are happy." "That's sweet of you," Amy said, her smile tight. "We're just aiming for something more current. It's all about the image, after all." As they continued discussing wedding details, I nodded along, but my thoughts were elsewhere. Every word Amy said seemed to be pushing me further out, making it clear how little she valued my input or presence. After they left, the silence in my apartment felt heavier than usual. I was used to being alone, but this felt different. It was the feeling of being shut out of my own family. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat by the window, watching the streetlights flicker on. My heart was heavy with worry. I had always been the one Scott turned to for help, the one guiding him through life's challenges. Now, it felt like Amy was in control, steering him in a direction where I wasn't welcome. Just have to watch and wait, I muttered to myself, taking a sip. But I'm not giving up, not yet. It was Scott's birthday, and even though things had been tense between us, I wasn't going to miss my only son's celebration. Amy had taken over planning everything, and somehow, my invitation had gotten lost in the shuffle. But a mother's place is by her son's side, especially on his birthday. So I decided to go anyway. I arrived at Scott's house with a small, carefully wrapped gift in my hands. The house was full of life, with laughter and music spilling out through the door. Taking a deep breath, I rang the doorbell, my heart pounding in my chest. Crashing a party was one thing, but crashing your own son's party without an invite? That was another level. Amy opened the door, and her smile faded a little when she saw me. "Lily, what a surprise. We weren't expecting you." Her words stung, but I held my composure. "Wouldn't miss my son's birthday. Where's Scott?" "He's around somewhere," she said, stepping aside reluctantly. "Well, come in, I guess." The house was decorated in shades of blue and gray, a sleek modern style that clearly had Amy's touch. I walked through groups of people, none of whom I knew. They were all Amy's friends, young and trendy, laughing and clinking their glasses together. Finally, I spotted Scott, chatting with some people who looked like his coworkers. "Scott," I called, my voice trembling slightly. He turned, and his face lit up when he saw me.
"Mom."
"You made it." He excused himself and came over, giving me a big hug. "I wouldn't miss it for the world," I said, handing him the gift. "Happy birthday, honey." "Thanks, Mom. I'm so glad you're here." He looked genuinely happy, but there was a bit of confusion in his eyes, like he was wondering why I'd say that. Just then, Amy appeared beside us, her smile tight. "Scott, your friends were asking about you," she said, then turned to me. "Can I get you a drink, Lily?" "No thanks, I'm fine," I replied, feeling out of place as she maintained her polite but distant attitude. As the evening went on, I tried to mingle, but Amy's friends were a close-knit group. Every conversation felt strained, and Amy often stepped in to either pull Scott away or take over the conversation with stories of her job and their future plans. At one point, I overheard Amy talking to a friend. Her voice was just loud enough for me to catch. "Yeah, it's a bit awkward that she showed up. I didn't think she'd come, considering the vibe." Her words felt like a slap. I wasn't just uninvited, I was unwanted. My presence was making her uncomfortable, maybe even embarrassing her in front of her friends. The realization hit hard, and I found myself retreating to a quiet corner, holding a drink I didn't even remember accepting. A little while later, Scott found me alone, his brow furrowed. "Mom, are you okay? You seem a bit off." I forced a smile, not wanting to spoil his day with my feelings. "Just a bit tired, that's all. It's been a long day." "Do you want to stay longer, or would you like me to drive you home?" His concern was real, but the last thing I wanted was to pull him away from his friends. "No, you stay. Enjoy your party." "I'll catch a cab," I said, standing up. "I just wanted to see you and wish you a happy birthday in person." He hugged me again, looking a little worried. "Thanks for coming, Mom. I love you." "I love you too, honey," I said, holding back the sadness as I left the party. "I love you too, baby. Always." With that, I slipped out the door, the sound of laughter echoing behind me as it closed. The night air was cold, but it was a relief compared to the warmth of a party where I felt like an outsider. The next morning, just one day before Scott's wedding, I was in my kitchen, the soft hum of the refrigerator the only noise in the quiet room. Then, I heard a knock at the door. Expecting it to be a delivery, I wiped my hands on my apron and went to answer it. To my surprise, it was Amy, standing there alone, her face serious, which didn't seem like a good sign. "Amy, what brings you here this early?" I asked, keeping my voice polite. Without waiting for an invitation, she stepped inside, her eyes quickly scanning my modest rented apartment, her disapproval barely hidden. "Lily, I'll get straight to the point. I'm here to make things easier for everyone. I have a proposal for you," she said. "Oh," I replied, my curiosity piqued, though I could feel a chill running through me. She pulled an envelope from her sleek, oversized purse and held it out to me. "I'm offering you $3,000 to not come to the wedding tomorrow. We think it's for the best." I stared at her, not because I was shocked by the offer, but because she actually thought this was acceptable. "And why would you think I'd agree to that?" I asked. Her lips tightened into a frown. "Let's be real, Lily. Your presence doesn't really fit with the kind of event we're planning. You know, with all the important guests we're expecting." My hands clenched at my sides, but I knew I had to play this smart. "I'm sorry, I think I didn't hear you correctly," I said, tapping my ear, pretending like I hadn't understood. "You want to pay me not to attend my own son's wedding?" "Why?" Amy sighed, clearly annoyed. "Because, Lily, you don't exactly fit the scene. The way you dress, well, everything about you, it's just not up to the standard we're setting. We have very influential people coming, and we can't have you there looking like that." She paused, waiting for me to show some kind of hurt or give in. But I didn't. I stood tall, my resolve growing stronger. "Go on, Amy. I'm listening," I said. "With this money," she continued, waving the envelope in front of me, "you could maybe fix up this place, or buy something nice for yourself later. You should be grateful I'm offering this." I almost laughed at her nerve. She thought this place was mine, and that I needed her charity to improve it. But I kept my face neutral, nodded, and took the envelope from her. "All right, Amy, if that's what you really want," I said calmly. Her relief was obvious as she gave me a tight smile. "Good. I'm glad you're being reasonable about this." After she left, I stood there, still holding the envelope, my thoughts racing. I gently closed the door behind her, my hands shaking with a mix of anger and adrenaline. I pulled out my phone and stopped the recording. Amy's cruel words were all there, clear and undeniable. I didn't waste any time and dialed Scott, my voice steady but urgent. "Scott, can you come over right now? It's important. We need to talk about something serious." "Sure, Mom, I'll be there as soon as I can. Is everything okay?" His voice was filled with concern, sensing that something was wrong. "Just come. We'll talk when you get here." When Scott arrived, he looked worried. He barely sat down before I said, "Listen to this," and played the recording of Amy's proposition. As he listened, the color drained from his face, and his expression turned to shock and hurt. "Mom, I'm so sorry you had to hear that. I can't believe she'd say those things," he stammered after the recording ended. "The wedding is tomorrow, Scott. What do you want to do?" I asked, my voice calm but firm, letting him know the decision was his to make. He ran his hands through his hair, clearly frustrated and confused. "I want to confront her, tell her it's over, and cancel the wedding. I can't marry someone who would do this." I held up my hand to stop him. "If you do that now, everyone will see you as the bad guy, and she'll play the victim. We can't let her control the story." Scott paused, thinking over what I said. "So, what do we do?" "We need to let everyone see her true colors. Let them hear the Amy I heard on this recording," I said, my voice calm but full of determination. He nodded slowly, understanding. "Okay, Mom." I won't say anything to her yet. After Scott left, I made several phone calls to old friends and former patients, people who knew me well and had been part of my life because of the surgeries I had performed over the years. We talked about old times, and though I didn't give too many details, I hinted that I might need their support soon. Sitting back on the couch, I felt a mix of anxiety and resolve. Tomorrow would be a big day, one way or another. I was ready to stand up for my family and show everyone who Amy really was. This wasn't just about stopping a wedding. It was about protecting my son from a life of manipulation and lies. The wedding day arrived, and with it came a swirl of nerves and a sense of duty. Today would change everything, no matter what happened. As the guests began to settle into the beautifully decorated hall, whispering excitedly about the upcoming ceremony, I knew the truth would soon come to light. I braced myself for what was about to be the hardest thing I'd ever done. The The plan was simple but powerful. Just before Amy and her father were supposed to make their grand entrance, a video about Amy and Scott's relationship was set to play. Instead, I had arranged with the AV technician to play the audio recording of Amy's cruel offer. My heart raced as the moment got closer, knowing how much impact it would have. As the guests chatted, waiting for the ceremony to begin, I gave a signal to the technician. The lights dimmed, and instead of the soft music of the couple's video, Amy's voice filled the room, loud and clear. "I'm offering you $3,000 to not attend the wedding tomorrow. We think it's for the best." There was an instant reaction, a gasp from the crowd, followed by murmurs of confusion and shock. People looked around, trying to understand what they had just heard. Then, the doors opened for Amy's entrance with her father, the timing perfect. The room went silent as they walked in. Her father smiled and waved, unaware of what had just happened. But Amy's smile faded as she realized that all eyes were now on her, filled with judgment and suspicion. As they reached the front, I moved to the second part of the plan. The screen switched to a video montage of testimonials from respected city figures, colleagues, and patients. They spoke about my years as a skilled surgeon, the lives I had saved, and the positive impact I had made in the community. The contrast was striking proof of my life of service and respect, directly challenging Amy's earlier words about my character. Amy stood frozen, her face pale, as the video continued. The guests, now clearly against her, whispered among themselves, their looks ranging from pity to disdain. Amy's mother, sitting in the front row, had tears running down her face, her hands covering her mouth in shock. Amy's composure crumbled, her earlier confidence shattered. She had been exposed in front of the very people she had wanted to impress. As the video ended, the room fell into a heavy silence. The weight of what had just happened hung in the air, thick with broken expectations and hard truths. My son Scott took a deep breath and stepped up to the microphone, his face serious. Every eye in the room was on him, filled with curiosity and concern, waiting for what he would say next. "I'm very sorry," Scott began, his voice echoing through the silent hall. "But I didn't see the selfishness and arrogance of my bride sooner." He paused, looking out at the crowd with regret. "I'm canceling the wedding, and I apologize to all of you for the inconvenience." Then he turned to me, his expression softening. "Mom, I'm sorry. Thank you for everything you've done for me. Without you, I might have made the biggest mistake of my life." His voice cracked a little, and my heart filled with both pride and sadness for what he was going through. A soft murmur of support rose from the crowd, and some guests stood up, applauding his courage. A tear slipped down my cheek as I watched my son, standing strong and showing the values I had always hoped to instill in him: integrity and strength. At that moment, Amy, who had been standing off to the side, broke down in tears. "I didn't know about your mother's background," she sobbed, her voice desperate. "This changes everything. Please, Scott, can we just talk about this?" But Scott shook his head, his decision firm. "There's nothing left to talk about, Amy. It's over." Even her parents looked at her with shock and disappointment, clearly stunned by her actions. They, too, seemed caught in the uncomfortable position of seeing their daughter's mistakes laid bare in front of everyone. Frustrated and embarrassed, Amy's emotions boiled over. "This is all your fault," she yelled at me, pointing a trembling finger in my direction. Her voice was raw with anger. "You've ruined everything." With those final words, she ran out of the hall, her sobs echoing behind her as the door slammed shut. The room was left in silence, everyone processing the unexpected drama. I moved to Scott's side, putting my arm around him. "You did the right thing," I whispered, feeling the weight of the day pressing down on both of us. He nodded, wrapping his arm around my shoulders. "Thanks, Mom. I couldn't have gotten through this without you." As the guests slowly began to leave, many offered quiet words of support or simply gave us a reassuring squeeze on the shoulder. I felt a mix of relief and deep sadness. The day didn't go how any of us expected, but truth and honesty won in the end. Scott was hurt, but he was free from a future that could have been much worse. After everything settled down, I finished the renovation of my house. It's beautiful now, a place full of peace and light, just like this new chapter of my life. 3 years have passed since that day. Amy, Scott's ex-fiancée, tried reaching out to me a few times, asking for forgiveness, but after everything, I just couldn't. I told her no each time. The last I heard, she lost her job. Her boss had been at the wedding and saw it all. She moved out of the city, and I don't know where she is now. In the meantime, life moved on in the best way possible. I retired from my hospital job, finally giving myself the break I deserved after so many years of work. Not long after, Scott met Janet. She's a wonderful person, kind and beautiful inside and out. They got married last spring, and it was the kind of wedding we had always dreamed of, full of love, laughter, and real happiness. Janet respects me deeply, and we've built a strong bond. It's such a joy to see Scott happy and in a relationship where they truly complement each other. Just the other day, during a quiet dinner at my house, Janet told me how much she appreciates our relationship. "Lily, I really admire how gracefully you've handled everything. I'm so grateful for how welcoming you've been," she said, her sincerity touching my heart. "I'm just thrilled to have you in the family, dear. You make my son happy, and that's all I could ever ask for," I replied, my voice thick with emotion. The kindness and love that now filled my home were a far cry from the silence it once held. It had truly become a home, ready for future gatherings and family celebrations. Feeling lighter and more adventurous than I had in years, I made a decision that even surprised me. I booked a trip around the world. It was something I'd always wanted to do, but kept putting off. Now, with everything falling into place, it seemed like the perfect time. When I told Scott and Janet, they were thrilled. "Mom, that's amazing. You've always talked about seeing the world," Scott said, his eyes lighting up. "And you've more than earned it," Janet added, giving me a hug. "We'll manage just fine here. Go make some amazing memories." So here I am, finalizing itineraries and packing my bags, ready to explore the places I've only read about or seen in pictures. It feels like I'm not just traveling to new countries, but also stepping into a new phase of life, one where I can simply enjoy and embrace the beauty of the world.
In the heart of a Huntington town, surrounded by rolling hills and winding streams, I grew up far from the flashy life of the city. Our small, worn-out house had creaky wooden floors and windows that looked out onto wide fields. It felt like a world all its own. It was here, with the simple warmth of family love, that my story began. My parents weren't rich in money, but they were rich in kindness and wisdom. My father, a local carpenter, had rough hands from years of work, but a gentle touch. He not only built furniture, but also taught me the values of hard work and humility. My mother, a school teacher, filled our home with books and stories, sparking my imagination and nurturing my dreams. Life in our small town was slow and simple. Neighbors greeted each other warmly, and community events were the highlights of our social calendar. I cherished this life, finding joy in the small pleasures, the fresh scent of earth after rain, the rustling of leaves underfoot, and the chorus of birds at dawn. It was at the local library where I first met James. He was different from anyone I had known. A visitor from the city, he had an air of sophistication but was unassuming. His family was well known in business circles, their wealth and influence extending far beyond the city's skyscrapers. But James, with his easy smile and genuine interest in my everyday tales, was a refreshing surprise in that world. Our initial conversations were cautious, like two worlds carefully getting to know each other. He talked about city life, the fast pace, endless opportunities, and dazzling lights. I shared stories of my town, the annual harvest festival, peaceful walks by the stream, and our close-knit community. In those early days, we often met at an old park bench by the lake, where we would talk for hours. The lake, with its calm waters reflecting the changing colors of the sky, witnessed our growing connection, weaving our different worlds into one. "Laura," James said to me one evening, his voice tinged with a vulnerability I had not seen before. "I have always been surrounded by people who care more about wealth and status, But with you, I found a peace I didn't know existed. You've shown me a different way of life, one that's real and full of warmth." His words stirred something deep inside me. James, where we come from doesn't define us. It's who we are when we're together that matters. You've given me a new view on life, opening my eyes to dreams I never dared to have. As our relationship grew, James told me about his family, especially his mother. She was elegant but had very high expectations. He spoke of her with respect, but also with concern. "She has her own ideas about who I should be with. I'm just worried about how she'll react to us." I reached out, taking his hand and feeling a slight tremble. "We'll face that together," I assured him. Love isn't about backgrounds or expectations. It's about two people who choose each other against all odds. The day James proposed was simple, just like our love. No grand gestures, just a heartfelt promise of a life together. As I looked into his eyes, full of hope and love, I knew this was just the beginning. The evening I was set to meet James's family, I was very nervous. Their grand mansion loomed large as we approached, a reminder of the different worlds James and I came from. James held my hand, giving me a reassuring look. "Just be yourself, Laura. That's all you need to be." I smiled weakly, trying to calm my nerves. "I just hope your mom doesn't think I'm out of place." James sighed, a hint of concern in his eyes. "Mom can be a bit much. Just remember, I'm here with you." As we entered the fancy dining room, James's mother, Shirley, a tall woman with a stern look, greeted us. Her eyes quickly scanned me, a flicker of disapproval crossing her face. "So this is the young lady who has captured my son's heart. Interesting choice, James." Dinner was elaborate, with dishes I couldn't even name. James's mother, ever the gracious host, offered me a plate with a sly smile. "I suppose these dishes might be a bit too sophisticated for your taste, Laura. We can get something simpler if you'd prefer." I felt embarrassed but managed a polite decline. "No thank you, I'm always eager to try new things." As the evening went on, her comments became more pointed. She eyed my dress, a simple but neat outfit, and continued to make subtle remarks. I had thought it was appropriate. Is that what passes for evening wear in your town? It must be challenging to find good clothes on a modest budget. James tried to change the subject, but his mother was relentless. "Tell me, Laura, what do your parents do? It's always fascinating to learn about different walks of life." I answered, feeling her judgment. "My father is a carpenter and my mother is a school teacher." "Oh, how quaint," she replied, her voice dripping with condescendence. "Hardworking people, I'm sure, but I suppose they couldn't offer you much in the way of a financial head start." The meal continued with her taking jabs at my small-town upbringing, my parents' humble jobs, and even my salary, which she somehow knew about. Each comment was polite but sharp enough to hurt. James was visibly uncomfortable, and his attempts to defend me only seemed to amuse her more. As we left, James's father, Richard, pulled me aside and offered a kind smile. "Laura, you handled yourself well. Don't let her get to you, she'll come around." In the car, James apologized profusely. "I'm so sorry, Laura. I didn't think she'd be this harsh." I sighed, feeling a mix of hurt and determination. "It's okay, James. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I love you, and that's what matters." That night, as I lay in bed, the sting of his mother's words lingered. But beneath the hurt, a resolve was building. This was more than just about fitting in, it was a test of our love and my strength, and I was ready to face it head-on. As the wedding day approached, the air was thick with excitement and growing tension. Shirley, who had taken it upon herself to oversee the preparations, seemed to find pleasure in belittling my ideas and choices at every turn. One afternoon, while discussing the wedding plans with James and his mother, the topic of the wedding dress came up. I had chosen a simple yet elegant gown that I felt reflected my personality. James's mother, however, had other ideas. "That dress, Laura, it's so plain. Don't you want to make a statement on your big day? After all, you're marrying into the family, she said, her voice laced with a patronizing tone. James squeezed my hand under the table, giving me a supportive look. Mom, Laura looks beautiful in that dress. It's her choice, and it's perfect. But his mother was relentless. Oh, James, let's be realistic. This is a high-profile event. People expect a certain standard. Laura, dear, you should consider something more fitting of our family's status. I tried to keep my voice steady, though her words stung. I appreciate your concern, but I really love my dress. It's special to me. She waved her hand dismissively. Well, it's your day, I suppose, but remember, it's not just about you. It's about how you represent us, too. As the days went by, her comments became more frequent and hurtful. Marian criticized the flower arrangements, the menu choices, and even the invitations. Each remark was a subtle dig at my background and my inability to meet her high standards. James and I often talked about this late into the night. I can't believe she's being so difficult, James would say, frustration clear in his voice. I wish she could just see how amazing you are and how happy you make me. I would lie there in his arms, feeling a mix of love and sorrow. I knew it wouldn't be easy marrying into your family, but I didn't expect it to be this hard. The wedding day dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the turmoil inside me. My parents and I had worked hard to make everything perfect despite Marian's constant criticisms. As I dressed in my simple but elegant gown, I hoped the day would pass without incident. The ceremony was beautiful, filled with love and heartfelt vows. James's eyes shone with affection and promise as we said our I do's. However, looming over the joyous occasion was the apprehension of the reception to follow, especially the speeches. As expected, Marian took the microphone, commanding the room's attention. The air was thick with expectation as she began to speak. Ladies and gentlemen, she started, her voice loud and clear. Today we have gathered to witness the union of my son James with Laura, a person from a different circle. Whispers spread through the guests, and I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. She continued, her words sharp and unyielding. While some may commend James for his charitable heart in lifting a beggar from the streets, we must be cautious. It's essential to keep our family's reputation and standards high, not let them be diluted by those who are clearly freeloaders seeking to elevate their status by clinging to a family of higher standing. The room fell into a stunned silence. My parents looked at me, their faces a mix of shock and hurt. James's face was a mask of disbelief and anger. The guests, a mix of our friends and James's high society acquaintances, looked on uncomfortably, unsure of how to react. My heart sank, and a deep shame washed over me. Her words were not just insults, they were meant to belittle and humiliate me in front of everyone we cared about. As she finished her speech with a forced toast to our future, the applause was hesitant and quiet. The room was wrapped in an awkward silence, the joy of the occasion spoiled by her venomous words. James stood up, his voice trembling slightly. "I'm sorry, Laura. This isn't what I wanted." His eyes were filled with love and sorrow. I looked around at the shocked faces of our guests, feeling incredibly humiliated. Her words cast a heavy shadow over what was supposed to be the happiest day of our lives. The tension lingered after James's mother's harsh speech. Then his grandmother, Mrs. Joyce, a respected and authoritative figure in the family, requested the microphone. Her composed demeanor and serious expression immediately drew everyone's attention. "Good evening," she began, her voice clear and firm. "I have something important to say. Laura, you have faced unfair criticism today, criticism that no one deserves, especially not on their wedding day." I looked up in surprise, and James beside me seemed equally astonished. Mrs. Joyce then turned to Shirley. "It seems we have forgotten our own past and where we come from. Let me remind everyone here, especially you, that before you were the lady of this house, you were a maid working under this very roof. It was here that you met your husband." A hush fell over the room. James's mother's face turned pale, her eyes widening in shock and embarrassment. Mrs. Joyce continued, her tone firm. So, for a former maid to stand here and scorn someone for their humble beginnings is not only ironic but deeply hypocritical. I could hardly believe what I was hearing. The room was silent, every guest hanging on to Mrs. Joyce's every word. You, who rose from poverty, should be the last person to judge or belittle another based on their background. We should be proud of Laura's integrity and strength, not deride her for it. The guests shifted uncomfortably, and whispers began to circulate. Shirley sat motionless, the impact of Mrs. Joyce's words clear on her face. In this family, we value character over wealth, kindness over status. Laura exemplifies these values, and I am proud to welcome her into our family, Mrs. Joyce concluded, her gaze softening as she looked at me. The room erupted into applause, a stark contrast to the earlier muted response. Shirley sat there, completely humbled, her earlier arrogance replaced by a visible sense of shame. I didn't feel sorry for her, James whispered to me. I never expected Grandma to stand up for us like this. I squeezed his hand, feeling a mix of relief and gratitude. She's amazing. The rest of the evening felt lighter, the air cleared by Mrs. Joyce's honest defense. Guests approached with warm congratulations and sincere smiles. I felt like they were all on my side, and it felt great. As we left the reception hand in hand, I felt a renewed sense of confidence and belonging. Mrs. Joyce's words had changed everything, breaking the cruel plans of a not-so-smart woman. The days after the wedding were filled with unspoken tension in James's family. It all came to a head during a family meeting at Mrs. Joyce's house, where the air was thick with expectation and apprehension. As we gathered in the grand living room, Mrs. Joyce began without hesitation, her voice firm and unwavering. What happened at the wedding cannot be overlooked. The way you spoke to Laura was disgraceful. She addressed Shirley directly, her eyes sharp. James's mother, usually so composed, looked smaller somehow, her usual confidence diminished. Joyce, I've already apologized to Laura, she said, her voice tinged with a hint of defiance. It's not just about an apology, Mrs. Joyce retorted. Your actions reflect on this entire family. You've become accustomed to a lifestyle funded by the family's money without appreciating its value. James's father nodded in agreement, his expression serious. My mother is right. You've lost sight of what's important. Mrs. Joyce then laid out her decision, each word deliberate and clear. I've decided to cut off the financial support you've been receiving. It's time you start contributing to this family instead of just taking. You'll need to find a job and learn to live within your means. The shock on Shirley's face was evident. She turned to her husband, seeking support. You can't agree with this. She can't just cut me off like this. But Richard surprised her. I stand with my mother on this. You've gone too far this time. It's for your own good. Shirley's eyes filled with anger and disbelief, her usual poise crumbling under the weight of her new reality. James, who had been silent, spoke up, his voice steady. Mom, Grandma's decision is harsh, but it's fair. You need to understand the impact of your words and actions. I sat there watching the scene unfold, feeling a mix of sympathy and relief. James squeezed my hand under the table, silently supporting me. The meeting ended with James's mother in a state of shock, slowly realizing her situation. She was clearly used to living off her family, and the thought of working gave her a headache. I could barely contain a chuckle. As we left, James leaned in close. I never thought I'd see the day when Mom would be at a loss for words, but maybe this is what she needs to change. I nodded, feeling a cautious hope for the future. Perhaps this will be a new beginning for her, for all of us. The family reckoning had been tough but necessary. It was a pivotal moment that promised to reshape the dynamics within James's family, hopefully for the better. The honeymoon was a welcome escape for James and me. As we walked along the sunrise beaches, The soothing sound of the waves provided much-needed relief from the recent family turmoil. One evening, as we watched the sunset, James wrapped his arm around me. "I'm sorry our wedding turned into such a drama, Laura. I wish things had been different." I leaned into him, feeling the warmth of his embrace. "It's okay, James. It wasn't your fault. What matters is we're together now, away from all that stress." James sighed, looking out over the ocean. "Yeah, but when we go back, we'll have to face the reality of my mom's situation. It's going to be tough for her." I nodded, understanding his concern. Maybe this will be a chance for her to grow, to see things from a different perspective. We spent our days exploring and our nights talking about our future. The challenges we had faced seemed to strengthen our bond, reaffirming our love for each other. On our last night, as we packed our bags, James looked thoughtful. "You know, Laura, everything that happened made me realize how important you are to me. I can't imagine going through life with anyone else." I smiled, touched by his words. "I feel the same, James. We've been through a lot, but it's only made our relationship stronger. We can handle whatever comes our way as long as we're together." As we headed back home, I felt ready to face whatever the future held, knowing we had each other. I felt a sense of peace. The honeymoon had not only been a break from the chaos, but also a time for us to strengthen our bond and prepare for the new chapter in our lives. We were returning to a changed reality, but we were doing it together, stronger and more united than ever. The future was uncertain, but I was ready to face it with James by my side. Coming back from our honeymoon, James and I were unsure of what awaited us at his family home. The car ride was quiet, both of us lost in our thoughts about the new family dynamics. As we arrived, the first thing we noticed was the absence of James's mother. Inside, we were greeted by his grandmother, Mrs. Joyce, who wore a knowing smile. "Welcome back, you two. I suppose you're wondering about the changes here," she said, her tone light but with an undercurrent of seriousness. "Yes, where's Mom?" James asked, looking around. Mrs. Joyce took a deep breath, her smile still in place. "Well, after you left, Shirley caused quite a scene, demanding that I restore her financial support. When I refused, she decided to leave. She's now living in a small apartment and, from what I hear, is looking for a job." James and I exchanged glances, the news sinking in. It was a drastic change from the luxurious life she was used to. "And there's more," Mrs. Joyce continued, leaning in as if to share a secret. "Your father is considering a divorce. He's had enough of her antics. It seems like she finally pushed him too far." "Well, she brought it upon herself," James said, his expression a mix of shock and relief. "I can't believe it. I knew things would change, but this is more than I expected." I reached out, touching his arm. "It's a lot to take in, but maybe this is for the best a chance for everyone to start fresh on a more honest footing." Dinner that night was oddly serene. The absence of James's mother was felt, but not in the way we had anticipated. The conversation was more open, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like there was a real sense of family. As we drove home later that evening, James was pensive. "I always hoped for a change, but I didn't expect it to happen like this. It's going to be a big adjustment for Mom," James said, breaking the silence. I nodded, feeling the weight of his words. "It's a tough situation, but maybe it's a necessary step for her to grow, and for your dad too, to find some peace. Sometimes, change is needed for people to truly see what matters." The ride home was reflective, the quiet only broken by the hum of the car engine. We both sat lost in our thoughts, contemplating the new reality we were returning to. The family we left before the honeymoon was not the same one we were coming back to. It was a sobering thought, but also, in many ways, a hopeful one. As we drove through the familiar streets, I thought about how much had changed in such a short time. James's mother, who had always been a looming figure of control and criticism, was now facing a reality without the financial cushion she had relied on for so long. It was a dramatic shift, but one that might lead to her personal growth. Perhaps, without the comfort of easy money, she would learn to appreciate the smaller things in life and understand the value of hard work and humility. James's father, on the other hand, seemed ready to break free from the toxic dynamics that had ruled their marriage. His decision to consider a divorce was shocking, but it also held the promise of peace and a fresh start. For years, he had been caught in the crossfire of his wife's demands and expectations. Now, he had the chance to find happiness on his terms, without the constant strain of living up to someone else's standards. The family we were returning to was not the same, and that realization brought a mix of emotions. There was sadness for the pain and upheaval, but also a glimmer of hope for a better future. Change, though painful at times, was often the path to something better, and we were ready to face it together. As we pulled into our driveway, James turned to me, his eyes filled with a mixture of determination and love. No matter what happens, we'll face it together. This is our chance to build something new, something stronger. I smiled, feeling a renewed sense of confidence. Yes, we will. We've already been through so much, and it's only made us stronger. Whatever comes next, we'll handle it. We stepped out of the car, hand in hand, ready to face whatever the future held. The path ahead might be uncertain and challenging, but with James by my side, I felt ready for anything. Together, we would navigate this new chapter, embracing the changes and growing stronger with each step.